Welcome to The Forgotten, Episode 3, On the Road to Disaster. First and foremost, I want to apologize for a little blooper that happened to me when I recorded Episode 1. While I was talking about the German poet Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, I mentioned one of his works as Der zerbrochene Krug, the broken jug, if you remember. And I want to apologize for this, as of course the actual author of Zerbrochene Krug was Heinrich von Kleist, also a German contemporary of Gneisenau, and author of the Hermannsschlacht, a drama about the battle in the Teutoburg forest. As someone who considers himself appropriately knowledgeable about the literature of his homeland, I regret this mistake deeply. The young Premierleutnant August Neidhardt von Gneisenau lived a boring life in his garrison in the little town of Löwenberg. As the income a first lieutenant had was not too substantial, he was not at all able to live life to the fullest, especially not because Löwenberg had just around 3,000 inhabitants back then. Yet he used the circumstances for the best and, like in Bayreuth, befriended himself with the more educated and noble families of the area. It is to be mentioned that he got along especially well with a certain Baron von Hoberg, who was the most popular man in the area, and let Gneisenau use his library, as well as ordering one of his own musicians to teach the young man to play the flute, an instrument of which August could claim to be a master after only 2 years. But when the Baron von Hoberg died in 1789, the young man was heartbroken, especially because he was told that he was to be included in his will. But the Baron died too quickly of a grave illness, it is not known exactly what it was, and so the will remained unchanged. Sardonically, Gneisenau writes to his father that he had lost a lot by this unpleasant circumstance. But life quickly changes to the best on the 20th of June 1790, when Gneisenau gets promoted to Stabskapitän, staff captain. Earning more money and not being the little Premierleutnant anymore, he is often invited to the soirees in the great estates of the nobility of Silesia. The rise of the French Revolution deeply unsettles Gneisenau. And what does he do when he is distressed? He writes a poem. Let me translate it for you. With what disgust the eyes move, back to the scenes of past, to scenes where, through repeated murder, the angry people got angrier, and makes it break the last ties of loyalty to their king and dethrone him. The plebeian thinks to be able to call himself a democrat by insulting the throne, and calls it freedom, if the ill mind breaks laws and cuts off every tie to them. As long as man is a slave to his desires, laws are necessary. Damnation to him who wants to break these ties. The wise man can control himself, even when the despots are ruling. The moron, who dobbed his rage's freedom, was only a slave, even in the middle of Paris. I will gladly recite this poem in German if you should so desire, just leave a comment. And trust me, it does rhyme. During the 2nd Division of Poland, Gneisenau's battalion is used to occupy the territories Prussia got out of the deal. The background behind the Polish divisions is too expensive to explain here, and could deserve an episode in their own right, which I will gladly make if enough people are interested. Nonetheless, the Polish rose against it, led by the legendary Tadeusz Kościuszko, but after the great triumph at, and I hope I pronounced this right, Rasławice, they lost ground to the coordinated Russo-Prussian onslaught. The Fusiliers around Gneisenau do not join in the fight, but quickly move into garrison around Częstochowa in German, where bad supplies and an angry populace, and, most of all, epidemics, lead to many soldiers leaving their lives. Gneisenau falls ill as well, but not very seriously. He spends a lot of his time in the sickbed learning Polish, which he, given the short time he stationed there, seems to have spoken admirably well. The Fusiliers remained stationed there until the 3rd Division in 1795. When they returned into garrison at Löwenberg, Gneisenau realized that he missed the real action in the west, where the First Coalition War was raging. He wrote several essays about several battles and sieges of the war, which seem to have garnered lots of interest as he is promoted to Kapitän, captain, on the 17th of November 1795. He gets the command of his first company, a company of the Füsilierbataillon Nummer 13, which had returned from the Western Theatre after the Peace of Basel. He moved into their garrison in Lauer, Silesia, and spends quite a lot of time getting bullied by the battalion's commander, a major who apparently suffered from severe gout and seems to have gone bitter over it. But Gneisenau spends his time with something else as well, getting filthy rich. This comes from the so-called company economy, meaning that the company commander got a certain amount of money for every soldier in his company, depending on his rank, from which the man was to be clothed, fed, paid, and in general supplied. Sending the soldiers home on unpaid vacation was very common and not at all an illegal practice back then. And he did exactly that. Gneisenau soon gathers a little fortune, and the 35-year-old man starts thinking about having a family. This wish was promptly fulfilled, as he takes the most romantic approach possible to a young noblewoman named Caroline von Kottwitz, bringing the message of her betrothed's death. The officer, apparently a good friend of Gneisenau, had died in a duel. This all happened in the spring of 1796, and she seems to have gotten over the death of her endeared very quickly, as she accepted his marriage proposal and married him on the 27th of June. Gneisenau and his wife seem to have felt genuine love for each other, as is apparent from many letters he wrote to her during the military campaigns that followed. On the first anniversary of their marriage, he wrote to her, "Today, my beloved Caroline, is the anniversary of my greatest luck. How much do I praise my beautiful wife, the happy day I have seen you first, and I thank the heavens for the courage they gave me. Has ever a quick decision had better consequences?" And during the hard exercises of the summer of 1797, he wrote to her that the never-ending movement of the body burns the fat I've gotten since I married you, but I do fear that I will regain it once I get into your care again. What a lovely relationship. Yet Gneisenau spends the bulk of his summer at exercises and reviews in Breslau, Silesia, and hardly ever has time for his wife. Nonetheless, on the 24th of May 1798, his eldest son, named August, as was tradition, was born. Whatever time he has for leisure, he spends on his military studies, especially the North Italian campaigns of a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte, of which he becomes one of the earliest and most ardent Prussian admirers. Napoleon was, according to a letter he wrote to one of his superiors, to be considered a teacher in war and politics. But he also focuses on the artillery, logistics, and military engineering. And he also writes a guide to the battlefields of the Silesian Wars, which again garner lots of interest. A little introspective into his head can be gained by his actions on the 16th of September 1789. Ordered to quell an uprising in a little farmers' community called Hirschberg, under circumstances unknown, his soldiers fire into the crowd of angry peasants who refuse their lord what they owe to him. One peasant died, and miraculously, the report survived, at least until the time Delbrück wrote his biography. In it, Gneisenau refutes that he has anything to do with it, but in the very end he notes, "It is better for one person to die than for hundreds." This unsettling comment sounds rather aristocratic for the very liberal man, and personally I assume that he wanted to impress his probably very, very aristocratic high-ups. He nonetheless attends the man's funeral, stating in advance that he'd not take any insults from the farmers, but just fulfill his role according to his social posture. He's ordered to rather retreat than to fight back if attacked, but thankfully the ceremony remains peaceful. Thiele's chronicle states for the year 1799 that Gneisenau spends a lot of his time with reading state-of-the-art literature. This goes so far as him organizing a play of Schiller's Wallenstein's Lager, Wallenstein's Camp, using his fellow soldiers as actors. His home becomes the center of the city's cultural elite, and his soirees were noted to be surprisingly civilized for the rural area. He's a great fan of the German authors of the time, especially the two most famous German authors of all times, Goethe and Schiller, names that make most German students' faces fill with fear even today. Please note that Schiller's Ode an die Freude became the anthem of the EU in the fourth movement of the Ninth Symphony by Ludwig van Beethoven. In April 1800, his wife gives birth to a daughter named Agnes. Gneisenau states that his life has never been happier, as he lives a comfortable life with his family, friends and fellow soldiers. But as we know already, he's always hungry for action. But we will see soon how he gets in over his head. I do have to talk about the Peace of Lunéville now, and especially about my favorite Hangman word, the Reichsdeputationshauptschluss. Dict.cc translates this into Principal Decree of the Imperial Deputation, which still is a great Hangman word in its own right. So, what do those 29 letters hide? Actually, it's called Hauptschluss der außerordentlichen Reichsdeputation, which is a little more true to the English translation, but we will stick with the Reichsdeputationshauptschluss, a word that gets better every time you say it. All that this marvelous word really hides is that the counts and dukes who had their territory on the left side of the Rhine, which had to be seized to France in the aforementioned Peace of Lunéville on the 9th of February 1800, wanted to be compensated for their loss of territory. The Kaiser of the HRE, Holy Roman Empire, pretty much just affirmed those border changes, which had already been decided upon by the pieces of Basel and Campo Formio, with Prussia and Austria respectively. But wait, wasn't the Kaiser the head of the Austrian monarchy as well? Confusing, I know, but too long to explain here. What is important is that the Reichsdeputation, the imperial deputation, decided that most of the lands held by the church were to be secularized, and that a lot of the tiny states, sometimes even the Reichsstädte, the imperial cities, were to be mediatized, grouped into larger states and pretty much sold to the highest bidder, as the winner of the war, the French, had to be bribed massively to affirm those changes. Many historians settle the secularization and mediatization as being an early step to unifying Germany, as, for example, there were only 6 out of 51 Reichsstädte left after the Hauptschluss. There is a lot more to be said about the whole subject, but that would take several days and more coffee and literature than I could possibly afford. So I hope you are satisfied by this little input, which I'm afraid left more open to question than it did answer, but we have to start somewhere. If you are interested in the Reichsdeputationshauptschluss, just leave a message, and hopefully I will find some time in the future to answer all of your questions. What matters to our narrative is that Gneisenau and his men were ordered to move to Berlin before the events, to give the Prussian delegation a standing army for them to impress the others, and for the eventual military resolution of any unsolved questions. The men live in disastrous quarters in Treuenbrietzen, where the food is expensive and of terrible quality, and the men don't even have enough water for everyone to drink, so some of the soldiers actually have to quench their thirst with beer. A loss of discipline is the result, and Gneisenau starts to realize that the once great Prussian army is in a state of disrepair. They participate in great maneuvers around Berlin and Potsdam and finally get back to Jauer in June of 1802. Just in time for Gneisenau to receive the message that his father died in the Silesian city of Oppeln. But he was not really struck by grief, as he had not known the old man too well anyways. Funnily enough, Gneisenau's brigade moves in to take the newly gained territories starting in July and August 1802, so over half a year before the Hauptschluss is even proclaimed on the 25th of February 1803. His forces move into Erfurt, a city he might have bad memories about, and takes garrison there. His company amounts to 165 men at this point, according to Thiele. His third daughter, Ottilie, is born on the 16th of October, just when Gneisenau is back in Jauer on a kind of family leave, as not too many men are needed to occupy the peaceful effort. But when he returns there, he spends his time drilling his men, attending soirees, visiting theatres, extremely opulent balls, or going out for a ride. Nonetheless, he dubs the balls as overly extravagant and makes clear that he thinks the higher aristocracy to be rotten. On the 30th of May, 1803, His Royal Highness Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia, the son of Friedrich Wilhelm II, visits the forces in Erfurt and is especially happy with the performance of Gneisenau's company at the Great Review. As his commanding general, however, advises the king to promote Gneisenau to major and give him a battalion to command, the king denies. We will have to say more about him and his wife later on. In the end of June, Gneisenau is back again in Jauer, this time leaving Erfurt for good. In July and August he shows the first signs of gout and moves into a health resort for a few months. Of course, as always, not really happy with doing nothing. So he writes and writes letters, theorems, histories, and as he leaves the resort, he's starting to become a well-known military publicist. His wife, both her parents being dead, buys a nice estate called Mittelkaufung, 3 miles away from Jauer, and Gneisenau starts to read a lot about agriculture, as he intends to turn the old estate into a profitable business. You can see that this man always needs something to do. On the 10th of August, his fourth child and second son, Hugo, was born. During new actions against the peasants of Hirschberg, Gneisenau gets commended by his battalion commander, stating that he was full of zeal and of great moral conduct, a great knowledge about mathematics and literature, a good drawer, and speaks French, English, some Polish, and Italian. When the French and Austrians went to war again in September of 1805, Gneisenau and his men were commanded to Sieradz, where the forces of the Prince of Hohenlohe-Ingelfingen assembled to either guard the border or join the war on the side of the coalition if the king ordered them to do so. Additionally, as the Prussians were bound to the Treaty of Basel, which stated that the kingdom had to be neutral in the war between the two empires, the mobilization was to be seen as a means to prevent the Russian forces, who joined the war as well, from passing through Prussian territory. So, Gneisenau had to leave his pregnant wife in a time where a bad summer had left their good and productive, and he writes that it was not a little thing to depart from her. He was an avid supporter of the idea to start a winter campaign which had to be conducted until the enemy, it is Napoleon, was either shattered or the war could be ended in a satisfactory manner. But the politicians in Berlin fear for their lovely estates in the countryside too much, as he writes to his wife. Whether he was right is stuff for discussions, but what we know is that the Russo-Austrian army was defeated in the Three Emperors Battle, Dreikaiserschlacht, as we call it, of Austerlitz, on the 2nd of December. But I deem this to be a great ending point to the episode. Next time, we will see the ultimate catastrophe for Prussia, the war with the French and the disastrous battle of Jena and Auerstedt. I wish you a good day or a good night. See you soon.